for watching. Hesty here again. Still working on the 92 Superjet. This is kind of phase 2 of the project. Started out with reinforcing the engine bay, but this video is going to be about repairing some cracks in the tray and putting in the footholds. Same bit, I surfed around YouTube and the forums and some different websites, and I couldn't find a really good video of all the stages of putting in the footholds. There are some good videos out there, some information that'll help you, but the footholds that they're installing were different enough from the footholds that I'm putting in that it didn't wholly apply. And sometimes it's nice to get a couple of different perspectives. A quick disclaimer here, I'm not a professional videographer or jet ski, fiberglass, Kevlar mechanic. So this is a way to do it. I apologize, some of the videographer-ness, some of the videos kind of tough. And if you know of a better way or you see something that I got wrong, please post it in the comments so anybody that watches this will pick up a better way to do it. This is how the 2-part foam comes, and I got this one from US Composites, and it's 2 parts. And you basically mix them together, stir it for about 30 seconds, and then start pouring it because it starts expanding quickly. And we'll get into more about how to use that as I start pouring. What I recommend against using is great stuff. A Kevlar, you can get it in a tape, which has the edges are sewn up so it doesn't fray so bad. So you can just get it in a 2 or a 3-inch tape. This one just happens to be from US Composites, but I believe you can get it from Tap Plastics also. A little bit about the foam. Here's some expanding foam, and it's still got the SMC that I've cut out of the hole. And this is a very stiff material. That's really where your strength comes from in the hole. Is not the SMC by itself. Here's another piece of just the SMC that I cut out where the foothold's going in. And that's pretty flexible stuff. And as you start cutting your hole and ripping the foam out, you'd be surprised at how flexible that thing is. Once you get it filled with foam, that brings the rigidity back up. And that's the beauty of that pour foam, is that it will fill all those gaps and make a nice, rigid, strong hole. The disadvantage of it over the polystyrene, which you'll see in the Kawasaki's, is that this will start to absorb water over time. The disadvantage of this foam is that it's hard to get to contour and get that rigid bond going to make a really strong hole out of it. So I'm going to try the combination. Okay, one material I forgot to talk about was Cabasil, which is a really lightweight, almost dust powder kind of stuff that you use to mix into your epoxy to make it thicker. When you're just laying the straight material, I recommend just going with the straight epoxy resin. But you can mix in pretty much as you want to get the consistency that you want. You can make a real paste that you could flick it on the ceiling and it would cure just hanging there on the ceiling and it wouldn't drip. Or you can just thicken it up a little bit. It's really, really dusty. When you go to pour it, it's going to get in the air, so I recommend wearing a respirator or a face mask of some kind, dust filter or something. But it's really useful stuff. Cabasil, I got this one from a boat shop over in Pensacola, mail order. They mailed it to me. It's really light, and it's, I don't know if you can see what kind of powder it is, but that mixes in real well. When you're mixing up epoxy and Cabasil, I would, excuse me, should have had my mask on. I would recommend mixing the epoxy first, and it'll turn clear once you get the resin and the hardener mixed correctly, if you got the right ratios, and then mix the Cabasil in. And you can do it in stages. It's kind of like when mixing concrete. If you add too much water to your concrete, you're kind of screwed. Same thing with the Cabasil. I put in about half of what I think I'm going to need, mix that in real well, see how that consistency comes out, add a little more until I get to the consistency that I want. The piece that I didn't talk about is every surface that I was working on, I did my best to get that surface level so that the epoxy resin would level itself. It works real well, self-leveling. So here are the clowner footholds that I got from Blosian. I picked those because they go pretty far forward in the tray, so they give you a lot of options. But I'm finding that makes it a little more challenging. And what I've got here is the one on the left is actually the, let me swap them. The one on the right here, you can see I've trimmed it pretty significantly. These are actually designed to go into a round nose. This back edge of the tray is a slightly different angle. So this overlap, as they come stock, doesn't quite fit. So here's some of the trimming I did. I feathered that edge a little bit, and then I had to cut this back in, and then this is the angle that's so tough to match. So if I take the one that I haven't trimmed at all yet and put them right next to each other, you can see how I'm curving that edge out a little bit to get the angle to match better, and you can see how I've taken a little bit off the top there. Okay, so I started cutting the hole in here. As you can see, there's the exhaust. The right hand blowsion, you can see this uplift. That's to give you a little bit of room on the exhaust, and I'm still awfully close to the exhaust. I'm having to be careful as I'm cutting my hole to mount it. The left hand is just straight flat in the foothold, but the right one, you can see that relief in there to give you a little more room in the exhaust as it comes up. Now, I've heard people dinging the exhaust a little bit to get them a little more room, and you may be able to, if you have your exhaust out anyway, elongate this hole a little bit here in the bulkhead, and then glass the top in, and then make sure you seal it up good with 5200 or a very good sealant, permanent sealant. Okay, so what I've been doing is just shaving a little bit and trial fitting it and shaving it and fitting it, and here's the fit that I think I'm going to go with. And again, these are the clowners. So you can see this back tip, I had to kind of scallop it out a little bit. I'm trying to keep overlap as much as I can to give it strength. But this edge here has been the toughest one working. So when I get this glass down and epoxied in, and I think I'm actually going to use the Kevlar I've got left over from the engine bay, I'm going to have that little gap to deal with. I'll fill it with foam behind it, will give me some support behind this, and that'll really bring some strength back in. Okay, so and then this corner, I'm going to have to bring some glass over to make some strength there, because you can see there's a bit of a gap. The rest of this, when I rivet it down, I'll be able to get rid of that gap there. There's enough flex in the glass. Okay, so here's the next step. You can see that I've dug out quite a bit of foam out of where the behind the footholds there. Gets pretty challenging to get the foam up here past the footholds, but my favorite tool so far is kind of a pry bar. I've been using a big screwdriver and a big kitchen knife that's been donated to the garage, and I decided to go ahead and cut out this piece of the tray where you can see here I've got cracks here, and I've already cut this little piece out where it was cracked, but I got to go a little further because this crack comes out here. So I made sure to encompass all of the cracks inside this, and I'm going to end up Kevlaring over that after I backfill with foam. I'll lay some sheet foam down. Some of this is very supported in the middle here. One other note here is you can see I radiused the corners so that there wouldn't be stress points anywhere. Make a nice round point. You don't want any square cuts. It's nice to have it good and straight, but having a sharp corner puts a stress point there, and of course it'll be prone to crack there again. Okay, so here it is with the floor of the tray cut out. You can see the top of the tunnel there, and these are where the pump bolts in, so that's something I want to make sure I seal off. This is the piece here that was sitting right there, and I just cut out, and I held it up over the trash can, and you can see all the water dripping out as I squeeze it, and it's pretty waterlogged, so all this foam has to go. I don't know if you can see how much water is coming out of there. So I cut a little bit more out of the tray here. I came back a little further than I originally thought I was going to. Again, radius these corners so you don't have a stress point there. I left this little piece here kind of as a guide, and that way I can epoxy and Kevlar everything together. But I wanted to get at the tops here. These are the pump bolts, the top end of the pump bolt, and they're just from the factory. They have a big glob of glue on them, but the front two were exposed, so a potential leak spot.
and so I wanted to get at these back ones. So I came back just a little bit further than I originally planned. And then if you look down there, you can see that white blob is 5200 that I just put on the top of all 6 of the ride plate bolts. Polished them, well, I didn't polish them, but sanded them down real. Put a big old bead of 5200. The idea being that it'll flex a little bit, so if somebody does run another bolt that's too long in there, it won't break the seal, which is why I didn't use epoxy. In the factory foam, it must be done in 2 or 3 parts, and I'm hoping that when I pour foam, I can get foam to go up in there and give some support. Okay, ready to start assembling the deck over the pump area. There's the hole that I cut out. I've fit 1 piece of styrofoam in here. You can see the second one here. I've cut it. Template had to do a little bit of relief for, so this guy just fits down in here. Nice and snug. Okay, and then I'm going to do 5200 on top of the pump bolts there. That's where the pump bolt's in, just to make sure. And then I've cut this piece to fit in. Fits in nice and snug. So I'll mix up some epoxy with some Cabasil. And we'll put a good thick coat across here and in these lower areas. And then we'll press this into place. And between the 5200 and the epoxy underneath there, should be pretty strong. But then, okay, here's the next step in putting in the footholds. Side project from the footholds was repairing the floor here. You can see where I've cut out, glued it down to the top of the pump, put quite a bit of Cabasil mixed up epoxy resin underneath, so it's all very firm. And then you can kind of see I've worked on this graduation here by some Cabasil epoxy so I can make a nice smooth transition. I've got to sand and grind this down yet, but that way when I glass over, it'll be nice and smooth. Okay, but really what we're working today is these filling back in the foam. And you can see here I've got 2 layers in already. It's 2-inch polystyrene. And the reason I decided to go with the polystyrene, which came from Lowe's in a 4x8 sheet, 14 bucks for 2-inch. The polystyrene will never absorb water. So I've got 2 pieces packed in here, pretty tight. I've wanted to go bigger pieces, but sometimes you can't fit it in the hole. I'm going with a fairly big foothold there, you can see. And by the way, as I'm going, I'm marking a couple of strategic places that'll be good to pour foam. You can see this gap here, and I showed you already the gap between the 2 stock. So if I drill a hole at that top mark and do the pour foam in, it should travel and expand into all those cavities.